Hi, I'm Ben.
I'm Jack.
And welcome to APUSH News at 11.
On tonight's news, we will be starting off with a segment based off of slave rebellions. This is because today is December 21st. It's been exactly 4 months since Nat Turner's rebellion. Nat Turner's rebellion was when an African-American slave named Nat Turner rebelled and ended up causing major destruction and killing people. The backstory of this is his owner allowed him to go and preach to other plantations on Sundays. When he was preaching, he was secretly talking to the other slaves, telling them how they needed to revolt and was planning revolt. His owner did not know that this was his plan. On August 21st, Nat Turner started the revolt by killing his owner and then killing his family, including the kids and his baby. Nat Turner then led the slaves to kill 75 total people and has been the most fatal slave rebellion in America's history. Thankfully, now that Nat Turner was caught in October and punished by being killed in November, we no longer have to worry about him and doing any more destruction. In total, 56 blacks were executed because of their involvement in the slave rebellion. Other people in the streets have killed 200 blacks and are usually angry white people, which is not looked upon good by the government. In a result of Nat Turner's rebellion, slaves are no longer allowed to carry guns for hunting and keep tools for farming. Banning of slaves from carrying money and earning money has also been banned. On the rest of tonight's segment, we are going to talk about past rebellions, specifically 3 major rebellions of slaves in America's history.
Stone's Rebellion was a slave rebellion that happened in September 9th, 1739. It was about 20 black slaves that tried to escape for their freedom from their plantations. So they met up in Stoner River, South Carolina to escape for their freedom, and also to plan out how they were going to escape too. Minutes after they escaped, they went to a gun store, and once they got there, they killed the shopkeepers there and escaped with weapons. Once the white settlers / Carolinians knew they escaped, they went after them. By then, about 100 black slaves have joined up with them, and also 60 Carolinians came after them. Once the conflict was over, about 20 white Carolinians died to 40 black slaves. Once that conflict was over with them dying, the Carolina lawmakers set in new acts, like the Negro Act and also harsher slave codes. The Negro Act was an act that said that they can't assemble in groups, they can't learn, they can't grow their own food, or they can't make their own money. And also with the other act, which was that they can't be there has to be 10 black slaves to every 1 white person, and they would also keep an eye on them to make sure they're not assembling or try to escape.
And thank you, Audie, for all the information you provided us with on the Stoner Rebellion. Everything the government did to oppress the slave rebellions after the Stoner Rebellion could have helped stop the rebellions. But unfortunately, they really didn't enforce all the things that they said they were going to do, which led to more slave rebellions, including Gabriel's Rebellion, which Ben is about to tell us about.
Gabriel Prosser was a skilled artsman with several advantages over other field-working slaves of his time. He was hired to work in different places by slave owners because he was very good at what he did. His Republican ideology of the Revolution and his anti-elitist views helped shape his vision in leading a slave revolt. Gabriel and a group of artisan leaders expected 1,000 slaves to follow them in a well-coordinated attack on Richmond Federalists and merchants who were the most prominent residents of the city. The purpose of the rebels was clearly expressed in a banner under which they planned to march, which eloquently stated, "Death or liberty." However, the result of the rebellion, even though it never really got started, was severe repression. While no whites were executed, 27 blacks, including Gabriel, were killed through public hanging. This really showed how people were willing to sacrifice everything for liberty and equality at this time. Many people, many of those white, now began to think that tightening the legal restrictions on slaves would be the solution. They thought that making the system of slavery closer to humane was the issue. Further hurting the slaves' way of life was the effect. The slaves were not scared enough and continued.
As effective as Gabriel's rebellion was on getting slaves more in check and trying to keep them from revolting, it wasn't completely successful. More rebellions continued to happen, including Denmark Vesey's rebellion.
Now we have Will in the field that's going to talk about Denmark Vesey's rebellion, which was the last slave rebellion to happen before Nat Turner's rebellion. Will?
Denmark Vesey's rebellion of 1822 had a detrimental effect on the South and the United States as a whole. Slave revolts spurred throughout the South, and the Denmark Vesey rebellion helped justify the South's reasons for making even stricter restrictions on the slaves. This led to harsher treatment of slaves, often leading to more abuse and killings. A very common punishment of slaves is when children were to be sold away from their families, which would tear families apart and often mentally break the slaves, sometimes even physically. These punishments were also fueled by the ban of importation of slaves from Africa in 1808. Punishments like these were often used to criticize the South and the slave plantations. The Denmark Vesey Rebellion also had a great impact on the North, for more people grew in support of abolition due to the treatment of slaves finally being shown to the public. With support growing of abolition, conflicts and differences between the North and the South are beginning to widen. Escaped slaves often explain what happens in the slave plantations as a way of promoting the rebellions and further proving their reasons of freedom. Denmark Vesey and the 34 other states involved were motivated individuals who sought freedom and wanted to become liberated men, even though a slave ended the revolt plans by telling his master. Movements such as Denmark Vesey Rebellion led to both positive and negative impacts on slaves and the nation as a whole. On the positive side, the rebellion helped shed light on the issue of slavery, and the support of abolition grew. But on the negative side, slave control became much more stricter, with harsher treatment, more abuse, and even more hangings.
Thank you, Will, for all the information you just provided us with on Denmark's rebellion. We are now all caught up on the major slave rebellions leading up to Nat Turner's rebellion, which happened 4 months ago.
That will be all for tonight's news segment. Thanks for tuning in.
Good night, folks.
After the rebellion was over, the Carolina lawmakers set in new laws, like the Negro Act, and also harsher slave codes. And the black slave codes against the slaves, like the Negro Act.
The slaves revolted. Nat Turner started it.
Bless you. Bless you.
Okay. Blooper.